Imagine being crowned Queen of England before even losing your baby teeth. A girl of just 6 years old, given in marriage to a king nearly 5 times her age. Obviously not for love, but as a pawn in a ruthless game of power. This isn't a legend. It's the true story of Isabella of Valois, the forgotten queen, whose fate was decided long before she had any sense of self. Few people know her name today, but at the end of the 14th century, Isabella was used as a pawn in a brutal political game between two of the greatest powers of the time, France and England. Isabella was born in 1389 at the Louvre, not as a fairy tale princess, but as the daughter of a king tormented by madness and a queen driven by power. Her father, Charles VI of France, was known as the Mad. In fits of delirium, he believed he was made of glass and eventually forgot who he was altogether. Her mother, Isabeau of Bavaria, was not paralyzed by the chaos. Quite the opposite, she turned it into strategy. Ambitious, manipulative, and influential, she saw her eldest daughter not as a child, but as a bargaining chip capable of securing alliances and stability for France. And at that time, France desperately needed stability. The continent was in flames. Since 1337, the 100 Years' War had ravaged Europe like an open wound. Burned villages, ruined economies, entire families sacrificed in the name of crowns and territories. It was in this broken world that young Isabella was learning to live. While other children played in gardens, she was being trained to smile at banquets, to maintain composure before courtiers, and to understand that her life did not belong to her. And when Isabella turned 6, her life shifted from being merely a reflection of the instability of the French court to the centerpiece of a grand diplomatic maneuver. In 1395, negotiations began that would change her destiny. An arranged marriage to Richard II of England, a 29-year-old king. The intention wasn't romantic, not even familial. It was purely strategic. England, exhausted after decades of bloody conflict, was seeking a truce to catch its breath. France, economically devastated by the same war, desperately needed relief. And so, Isabella became the most valuable piece on the chessboard. The treaty included a massive dowry of 800,000 francs and, more importantly, the promise of 28 years of peace. But here's the detail that shocked even by medieval standards. While princesses were typically betrothed around the age of 12 or 14, Isabella was just 6 years old. The idea was that the marriage would be consummated in the future, once she reached maturity. Still, the image of a child crowned queen of an enemy kingdom was already enough to stir both astonishment and hope. 2 ceremonies sealed this unusual alliance. The first, in 1396, took place in Calais with a strong diplomatic focus, a showcase to prove that France and England, after so much spilled blood, could secure peace through the purity of a child. The second, in 1397, was held in London, at the heart of English power in Westminster, where Isabella was crowned and acclaimed by the people. Imagine the scene. A child, wearing a crown and royal mantle, being presented as the queen of a foreign nation. For some, it was a symbol of reconciliation. For others, a cruel reminder that even childhood innocence could be sacrificed at the altar of politics. Curiously, however, her relationship with Richard II lacked the weight of a traditional marriage. He treated her more like a daughter than anything else. For a girl torn from childhood, that was at least a relief. Chroniclers report that Richard gifted the young queen richly illustrated books, exotic birds from faraway lands, and musical instruments that delighted her. These gestures revealed not only the king's fondness, but also an attempt to offer her a space of gentleness amid the political brutality that surrounded her. Can you imagine? A child who should have been playing in the gardens of Paris now learning to decipher treaties, listen to the council of diplomats, and maintain the posture of a sovereign. Isabella was immersed in a carefully crafted education. She studied English, learned the complex etiquette of the court, heard tales of past kings, and received lessons in diplomacy that would shape her worldview. Between lessons, she found comfort in the friendships she formed with English ladies-in-waiting, such as Margaret Holland, who introduced her to the rituals of courtly life and provided a much-needed support system in the midst of a foreign court. But behind the image of the smiling child queen at banquets and ceremonies lay a much more serious truth. Isabella was not just a girl in silk dresses and sparkling jewels. She was the guarantee that peace between France and England would hold. Only, the illusion of stability Isabella seemed to live within the English court wouldn't last long. In 1399, the ground beneath her feet crumbled. Richard II, the man who had treated her with tenderness and shielded her from the cruelest side of politics, was deposed by his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, who crowned himself Henry IV. For a child barely beginning to understand the weight of the crown, it was like watching the world split in two. Overnight, Isabella went from being the symbolic wife of the king to an inconvenient piece on the board of a usurper. The new crown needed to neutralize what she represented, so the little queen was confined to the Tower of London. It wasn't an ordinary prison. She was surrounded by luxury, jewels, servants, and feasts. But all of it was nothing more than a gilded cage. Imagine being a child living in a palace, yet knowing every door is guarded, and every smile is a mask of surveillance. In 1400 came the cruelest blow. Richard II died at Pontefract Castle. The accounts vary. Some say he was murdered, others that he starved to death. What's certain is that Isabella, still a child, lost not only her husband but the only protector she had ever known on English soil. Henry IV didn't stop there. He tried to pressure her into recognizing his legitimacy as king, to be a symbol of support for his rule. But Isabella resisted. Even at just 11 years old, she displayed remarkable dignity. She refused to legitimize the man who had usurped the royal crown. In 1401, she was finally permitted to return to France. She returned not as the innocent princess once sent away to marry, but as a widowed queen, marked by loss, trauma, and experiences far beyond what anyone her age could be expected to endure. And yet, the home she returned to no longer felt familiar. Her father, King Charles VI, remained trapped in episodes of madness, forgetting who he was, sometimes unable to recognize even his own daughter. The father who should have been her refuge was, in truth, a fragile reflection of the kingdom's instability. Her mother had plunged even deeper into political maneuvering. Ambitious, cold, and increasingly powerful, she treated her daughter not as a survivor of tragedy, but as an asset to be repositioned on the European chessboard. Isabella returned from England at only 11, but already carried the weight of a widowed queen, something that could either be a valuable card or a dangerous burden. It's likely that, after years in England, Isabella had picked up a noticeable accent upon returning to France, a seemingly small detail, but in a court obsessed with identity and symbolism, it became a constant reminder that Isabella was no longer entirely French. By 1406, Isabella was just 16 years old, yet she bore the weight of experiences that made her far older than her years. That same year, she was once again led to the altar, this time in French territory, married to her cousin Charles, Duke of Orleans, who was only 11. The wedding took place on June 29th in Compiègne, in a grand ceremony worthy of a union that was not only familial, but deeply political. This time, Isabella did not become the symbol of a truce between enemy nations, but rather a peace in an internal conflict tearing France apart. The civil war between the Armagnacs and the Burgundians. Her marriage placed her at the center of this turbulent landscape, turning her into the Duchess of Orleans and a crucial figure in a drama no longer limited to war with England, but rooted deep in the heart of France itself. Interestingly, unlike her relationship with Richard II, her bond with Charles was described differently. Despite the reversal of ages, with her now being the elder, there was genuine affection. It was not merely an alliance on paper, but a human connection that, in contrast to her first marriage, offered Isabella something she may never have known before: companionship. 3 years later, in 1409, Isabella gave birth to her only child, Joan of Valois. The birth was celebrated as a promise of continuity for the family line, but it also marked a new chapter in Isabella's life. From child queen and widowed queen, she had now become a mother. The birth of Joan brought joy and hope to the House of Orleans, but it also marked the beginning of the end for Isabella. The childbirth was difficult and left her body deeply weakened. In an age when medicine was still far from offering effective care, complications like fevers, infections, and hemorrhages were common and often fatal. Just a few months later, in Blois, Isabella passed away. She was only 19 years old, a life as brief as it was intense, marked by crowns, wars, imprisonments, and alliances that changed the course of European history. According to some chroniclers, her death was a direct result of the difficult childbirth. Others pointed to tuberculosis as a possible cause, but in the end, the exact explanation hardly mattered. Once again, the fragility of the human condition had overcome even one of the most powerful women of her generation. Her body was first buried at the Abbey of Saint Lalmer in Blois. Later, it was transferred to the convent of the Celestines in Paris. In a ceremony that reaffirmed her connection to the French royal family, Isabella of Valois left too soon, but her memory never truly vanished. She became known as the Child Queen of England, an almost symbolic figure who embodied, on her own, the fragile truce between two enemy nations. Her only daughter, Joan of Valois, survived childhood and, in 1424, married John II of Alsace, ensuring the continuity of her bloodline. But Isabella's true legacy lies not just in the lineage she left behind. It lives in the stories she represented. Culturally, her journey inspired chroniclers and poets to reflect on the role of childhood in power, on how young girls were turned into political instruments before they could even grasp the meaning of the word reign. What's your take on all this? Do you think Isabella was a victim of royal ambition, or one of the most resilient women of her time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through an important, yet dark, chapter of history, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to discover the disturbing story of France's most infamous decapitation device. Click here on the screen and watch now.